Right. I guess we're ready to start. So, this is a monthly series that we do, as some of you are aware. There's a monthly series for college educators, and we've been trying to take up issues that are relevant, that are contemporary, and that have a bearing on the classroom as well. We are very excited to have you here for this insightful session. And as you know, the agenda for today is to talk about climate change in the classroom and how can we design compelling and effective climate change modules for our students. This session is specifically for educators from all disciplines, whether you want to introduce climate change to your curriculum or you've already been doing so and want to enhance your existing modules, you are at the correct place. And since climate change is one of the most talked about, most important, crucial, and time-bound issues of our current age, it definitely is something that needs more discussion within the classroom and outside of it as well. Now, for today's session, we are going to dive into two key areas. One is climate adaptation and mitigation, and the other is climate policy and politics. And as I mentioned in the beginning, this session is slightly different from the others. We are actually looking forward to your inputs in how you teach the topic in your classrooms. What are the resources that you use? Are there any activities that you have at hand? So this one is an interactive session, and we would really, really welcome any inputs that you have. Now, coming to the speaker for the day, Tushant. Welcome, Tushant.
Thank you.
And he will lead the session. He will share his insights on how we can integrate this theme of climate change into our classrooms. And first of all, what do we mean when we say that we want to teach climate change in the classrooms? What are the things that form the core of the theme? So, Trishant is a program officer at the Climate Change Program at the Center for Science and Environment. And his primary research areas are carbon markets, climate-based trade policies, climate mitigation, energy transition policies. So everything that ties in really well with today's session. And he is one of the most appropriate people to be leading this session today. He has extensive experience in adaptation initiatives within the forestry and agriculture sectors, and in research focused on ecosystem restoration and conservation issues. Before I hand the mic over to Trishant, I would encourage you to participate in the session, and please feel free to share your ideas, any questions that you have in the chat box, any comments that you have. Towards the end of Trishant's presentation, we will take a few questions, and then we will move on to a more interactive discussion with all of you regarding how can we teach this topic in the classrooms. So over to you, Prashant.
Thank you, Sakshi. I think my sharing is disabled.
Okay.
Yeah, just a second.
Yeah, try.
Sure. One second. Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Trishant Dev, and I work for the Climate Change Program here at Center for Science and Environment. Thank you for joining us. And today we will be discussing what are the key themes that could be taken up in classrooms when teaching climate change. So I hope my screen is visible to you all. So to begin with, I think the most important aspect of teaching climate change is to establish the science of climate change, best taught through visuals, graphs, data, and most importantly through the attribution of events that people experience in their daily lives. If you see the graph on your screen, on the right-hand side, you will see that it is a graph of the daily average sea surface temperature, and it has been a record for over 400 days that the temperature has been higher than what it was a year ago for the same day. So I think these kinds of visuals are something striking, and they also appeal. They are also more easily explainable to students. Uh, we can also refer to studies that actually attribute climate change to anthropogenic activities. The World Weather Attribution Network is a body that does that, and maybe we can refer to those studies to show how climate change is something that has happened because of anthropogenic activities. Here, I have also used another graphic to show the impacts of climate change. So if you see the dashboard, it's a busy graph that shows the impacts of climate change in India, extreme weather events. And we see what is happening in India is actually a disaster a day, we used to call it. Uh, and you'll see on the right-hand side, there are a lot of news about sort of climate events that have happened, extreme weather events throughout the world. So we need to pull out stories from the internet and discuss them in classrooms. And these stories should be those that are closer to the experience of the students. There could be interactive sessions where students could contribute to some of the news that they have read or heard. And I think this is a wonderful thing to do because we also do it. And above all, I think the strongest way to communicate impacts is through visuals and stories, best told in short videos and documentaries. So if possible, short documentaries can be showcased in classrooms, and this could be a good way to share the impacts of climate change with students. These are some of the resources that we have collected for you. You can go through them. After discussing impacts, I come to what is known as climate action and what we must understand about it. It is important to first define what we mean by climate action. And here I've given a definition from the Sustainable Development Goal 13, which says that climate action is taking urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts by regulating emissions and promoting developments in renewable energy. So why the action is urgent? Because a 2-degree warming will be catastrophic and will become so extreme that people won't be able to adapt to the change. Combating climate change is what is called as mitigation, taking action to reduce the greenhouse gases. Then we have adaptation. When we talk about uh, mitigating the impacts of climate change or dealing with the impacts of climate change, we call it adaptation. Adaptation can be in human systems or it can be in natural systems, and we'll come to that later in a bit. So I'll talk about mitigation in brief. What efforts could be made under climate mitigation? What are the challenges in making these efforts? Uh, First comes the energy sector because it is the largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. The graph on the left, if you can see, shows the various options that IPCC has put forward and how potent these solutions are in solving our problems, and what is the cost associated with it. And why I want to show this is because, so when we talk about things like cost and other socioeconomic indicators, we are situating these solutions, which are actually scientific solutions in the real world. It is not just important for a class to know what the solutions are, but to know what solutions work for us, given the socioeconomic conditions we have, the political conditions we have, where do we belong? And for instance, consider direct air capture. It's a technology where CO2 is directly captured from the atmosphere and stored underground. Now, this is a solution that is very appealing in the sense that you are directly pulling out CO2 from the atmosphere, but it's a capital heavy activity to do. So it is very important to understand who can do this activity. Can a country that is already under a debt, an economic debt, perform these kinds of activity or rely on these kinds of activities for climate mitigation? So yes, situating climate solutions in these contexts becomes important. The graph on the right shows that 22% of our energy needs today are met by electricity. 63% of that is from fossil fuels. So to be clear, that 22% of electricity also uses fossil fuels. So all in all, there are two pathways largely agreed upon in this case. One is that we need electrification, a lot of it. And secondly, that electricity itself needs to come from cleaner sources. So when I mention the word pathway here, I mean that this is a choice that policymakers and society at large is making. There may be several pathways, but this is how we have decided that this is the way to go for reducing our footprints. So I think a sectoral approach to studying climate mitigation is helpful because every sector makes up a coherent system in which solutions are generally interlinked. For instance, the agriculture sector, agriculture, forestry, and land use sector, which is shown on your screen, is different from the energy sector or the industry sector, the waste sector. Each sector needs a dedicated focus of mitigation solutions. So I think an approach where you take mitigation action sector-wise is a very helpful one to understand in depth each sector. And basically, here too, I represent the various solutions that IPCC has given. There's a graph and how costly these options are and how effective are they to combat climate change. But despite these, we often get asked, if we have so many solutions, what is the problem? And sometimes the question is even more direct. Why are things not moving? Why are things moving so slowly? And so we need to discuss the challenges as well. For example, if you see in energy transition, shifting away from fossil fuel-based energy to renewable energy, we have certain barriers. For one, energy demand and emission both are rising, especially for developing countries that have increasing needs like India. For two, the unit cost of renewable energy deployment has fallen. So we see that renewable energy has been scaled up very quickly, but we also see that fossil fuel capacity is also increasing. So renewable energy scale up in itself does not mean anything for climate if it is not complemented with simultaneous fossil fuel phase down. So this is something to highlight, and this is where the study of climate change becomes interdisciplinary. That is what I think. We are also studying socioeconomic issues, politics, finance, and much more. And so broadly, why is climate action hard for countries? These are some of the factors. One is, of course, climate finance. A commitment was made by developed countries to mobilize finance to the developing countries that has fallen short. So it's a barrier. It's a tough barrier to cross for countries who want to take action to combat as well as to adapt to climate change. Then there are impacts on economy that countries will have when they shift their let's say, energy use or energy production. There is political support issue, the issue of lack of studies on various kinds of problems that we are facing, and of course, technological innovations. So these are, again, some of the resources that could be referred to by the educators, by the students and others. Bonn Climate Change Conference was held in June this year, and COP29 is about to be held. And therefore, there's a lot of information on what happened at Bonn and what is expected at COP. So tracking the current developments and conversations is also very relevant for students. So next is adaptation. Adaptation involves adjusting practices, processes, and structures to minimize harm from climate change. And it is important to stress while understanding and teaching adaptation that it is important, especially for countries like India, developing countries which are vulnerable. Consider countries that contribute less to climate change. They have little avenues to follow mitigation, but they may be equally or more vulnerable than other countries. This demands that they put efforts into dealing with adaptation as much as they are putting in efforts to deal with mitigation. So adaptation could take place in different systems. In human systems, you could have let's say, agricultural practices like crop diversification, where you avoid monoculture practices. Uh, you could also get into water management practices. Then there are adaptation in natural systems, how natural ecosystems adapt to the problem of uh, climate change. And then there could be human facilitated natural system adaptation. How do we manage our forests? How do we prevent the degradation of forests? And how do we manage wetlands? So these are some of the techniques, solutions under adaptation. So diverse and feasible kind of adaptation options exist to the and these some of the options given on your screen are from IPCC. One of the things to stress in this is that the adaptations approaches are more localized compared to mitigation approaches. So even though we would like to teach the possible approaches in classroom, attempt must be made to identify what adaptation measures best suit our condition, our towns, our cities, our university campuses, and what students think are the best adaptation solutions that would suit their condition, their situation. But again, adaptation is a much more complex theme, and to understand what would it actually entail in terms of resource requirements and action is actually difficult. Besides, it has other challenges. For instance, if you see the graph on your screen, uh, it shows what is the adaptation needs that have been determined by the Adaptation Gap report, and what is actually the adaptation fund that has been mobilized. There's a significant gap in the mobilization of funds, but there is also the need to understand what sort of adaptation measures are needed, and how do we solve the issue of institutional constraints? How do we deal with risks of maladaptation that actually increases the problem rather than solving it? And these are some of the resources that we have compiled for adaptation, reading about national adaptation plans that countries have come up with. Now I come to the topic of climate policy and politics connected to the first section on climate action. Since the problem is shared globally, the politics and process is also studied in a global context. And the most important aspect of this section is to discuss what is known as climate justice. Climate justice is the idea that tackling climate change should be done in a way that is fair and acceptable to all. It recognizes basically two things. One, that some of us are more responsible for causing emissions than others. So the responsibility is not shared equally. The second is, while uh, that everyone is not affected equally by climate change, the impacts are not felt equally. So two principles get important when we discuss climate justice. One is of equity, and the other is of CBDR, or the common but differentiated responsibility. While equity is a broader concept, a principle of fairness emphasizing that there should be just outcomes in dealing with climate change. Uh, Common but differentiated responsibility recognizes that, yes, the responsibility is shared, but it is also differentiated based on the responsibilities and the capabilities of different countries and of different communities. For example, equity, India argues for fair access to emission space, considering its low per capita emissions and its overriding needs for development and solving the problem of poverty. The concept of CBDR, and one example can be the US and the European Union, are expected to take greater action in mitigation or adaptation efforts, providing financial support or technical support to vulnerable communities because of their historical emissions and their historical responsibility, also because of their capability, because these are rich countries with per capita income that is significantly higher than the others. And if you see, there's a graphic on the right hand side that shows basically what the per capita emission of each country relates to the other. For India, it's about 8 as much as it's about 102 for Ethiopia. So that's a lot of difference between the two countries. And in relation to this, the politics of climate change is also important to be taught. What is to be discussed in that politics is both the national and the international context of climate. In India, for instance, teaching about India's climate policy and where India stands in terms of politics is important. India has been an advocate of climate action and climate justice in climate action for as long as the climate politics has existed, for as long as the climate politics process has existed. It has also set its nationally determined contributions or national commitments under the Paris Agreement. The quantified ones are listed here. So it's quite ambitious in that India also has its development challenges and developmental goals. Then when we get on to talk about the aspects of international cooperation, we talk about the Rio Earth Summit of 1992, where it all began. The politics of climate change actually was converted into a convention, which is now known as the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Then we talk about the Kyoto Protocol, the landmark protocol that established the responsibility of different countries to reduce their emissions. And after this, of course, came the Paris Agreement, where all countries were asked to set voluntary targets for themselves to reduce emissions. And among all this, we also have the initial conference of parties, which are parties to the Convention on Climate Change. So COP29 is upcoming. So I think it is important to talk about the international context, the international politics, and what is happening, what sort of developments are taking place in this. And with this, I end the presentation. Thank you all. And thank you, Sakshi.
Thank you, Tushant. I think we have a few questions in the chat box. So let's first address those and then we'll move on. Pratima ma'am, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question? Pratima ma'am, are you there?
Yeah, very much. Thanks,
Yes,
Sakshi.
please.
Prashant, wonderful to listen to you. The data, the sources, they were all very captivating. Thank you so much. Great study being done.
Thank
Now,
you,
as I
ma'am.
was writing, because as an educator and particularly as a mentor to teachers and students, I often face this paradox that we are talking a lot in terms of handling, reducing carbon footprints, and until actions are happening at the grassroots level, things will not change. So the younger the students, they assimilate the information and they are ready to understand also. But when you collect the data for a country like India, highest in population, though we are not a huge producer of carbon dioxide per se, or even methane, actually, methane we are, but the data is suppressed. I'm sure you also know the whole politics around meat consumption, particularly from the Europe and West, that we take care of their cattle and beef is exported a lot. So there's a lot of geopolitics also involved, but I'll not go to those aspects. But as an educator or as an educator who's addressing teachers' needs at this point of time, I really feel how exactly things should happen in the classroom, which we see the visible changes outside, not only in the classroom or the notebooks or in the presentations, but actions happening. So I was just trying to write why it is we are consuming, we are huge in population, and we need to grow as economy. We are number 5, we are targeting number 4. So ministries are working to be higher and higher in economy of the nation. But consumption wise, and see every festival season, it is that we have marketed festivals as the ambassadors for consumerism. Isn't it a paradoxical condition that we are teaching the younger generation, hey, consume more, do more. You have a cheap fashion, cheap fabrics, cheap. The whole concept is having take more. That is something painful, to be honest. So you are under a CSC. How do you foresee sitting in the national capital? How do you foresee the changes happening? Please tell.
Thank you for that question and also the statements you made, ma'am. On point. See, the problem is that we tend to stress the issue of consumption and consumption not only for India but worldwide. But specifically talking about consumption, yes, our consumptions are increasing and definitely it's in some ways a problem. But then if we talk too much about the consumption of developing countries in let's say the geopolitical forums or international platforms, so to say, uh, we actually tend to spend more time uh, in pointing out the heavy consumption of developed countries more than what is ours, because India as a developing country, or other developing countries for that matter, are growing. And the moment we start talking about cutting down our consumption, we also are in a way uh, in some sort of conflict with some of the development needs we have. For example,
Right.
if I give an example of energy consumption, if we keep talking about coal and phase out of coal, we also need to understand that for India and for the vast population of India, which is energy poor, coal is an affordable option for it. And the moment we talk about phasing out coal, we are talking about bringing in energy that is unaffordable for a large population in India. So I think the balance is hard to strike in terms of the narrative, as well as in action, as to how much do we uh, talk about the uh, consumption issue within developing countries. Uh, when it comes to action, I think you rightly pointed out that the we are talking a lot. That's why when I do a presentation, I put a slide on the actual solutions that we have and debating or discussing the socioeconomic aspect of those solutions. There's too much noise around both action and what is the problem. But I think if you're not talking about the problems, not engaging in those problems, you are giving space to the noise, which does not contribute as much to the problem, the solution. So I hope it became a little incomprehensible at the end, but I guess I'm able to make sense. Sorry.
Okay, so thank you, Tushan. Thank you, Pratima ma'am. I see a lot of comments in the chat box asking about how do you teach these in the classroom. So we can, I think, now move on to the next part of our session, where we will actually talk about how you can teach these topics in your classroom. Um, we will take up any other questions that you have for Trishant towards the end of the session. So, Amit sir, Anjali ma'am, we will take up your questions definitely towards the end of the session. For now, let me quickly explain to you the flow of what we're going to do next. I am going to share a link in the chat box, and you will have to join another app using that link. It's not an app, it's a web link that I'll share with you. And once you join that, we will take your responses. So what essentially we're trying to do is taking your responses on how you are teaching climate change in your classroom. What are the activities that you are using? What are the resources that you are using? A few of the resources that Trishant shared and the activities that he has shared, we will share everything with you later on towards the end of the session. So you need not worry about that. And what, according to you, so Prashant has explained climate mitigation, adaptation, and climate justice in a overview manner. So now, according to you, what are the subtopics under each of these themes that can be taken up in the classroom? Once we collate all the responses, then we can come up to a consensus at the end that what are essentially the different topics, the activities, the resources that we can use. So I'm going to share the link with you. In the first slide, it will ask you to enter your name. So please ensure that you enter your name correctly. That is how we'll be preparing your participation certificates. So please put the name that you would want to be displayed in the certificate. And we'll start once everybody has joined. The link should be there in the chat box now. Okay, that link is there in the chat box. Please join using the link. I will also, yeah, I can see that 10 of you are here. You should be seeing a screen to enter your name and your email address. Once everybody has done so, we can move forward. So I think what we can do is we'll take all the responses first, Trishant, and then towards the end, we can discuss, and then maybe if you have anything to add on, we can do that. All right, 18 of you have responded so far. I'll just wait for a couple more minutes. If you're facing any issues in joining, please put your query in the chat box and our team will answer it for you. Right, 25 people have joined so far. Anjali ma'am,
because there are different tools.
please join using the link and enter your name there. Right, 29, 30 are there. We still have around 50 people in the call. So maybe we'll just wait for half a minute more and then we'll begin. Okay, so in the next slide, as I mentioned in the beginning, there are two topics that Trishant has essentially covered today: climate mitigation and adaptation, and climate justice, or you can also call it climate policy and politics. So in the next slide, we'll ask you to think of subtopics that can be taken up from each of these themes and then put it as a response. You will only have 25 characters to enter, and you can put in two responses. So take your time, think carefully, and then respond. So two subtopics that you think from whatever you have understood from Trishant's presentation that you think could be taken up under the theme climate mitigation and adaptation. Any two that come to your mind?
Could it also be some topic that they teach and was not covered here, something that they have in mind?
Yeah, obviously. Anything that you are already teaching but was not covered today, most welcome to enter that. We will add it on to our list as well. Three people have responded so far. You'll have to keep the topics very specific, like green methods. I can see green methods. I can see as a response. It's a little vague, so it's probably better to put in specific topics like I can see last mile mobility as one, climate finance as one. We'll share all these responses and do a quick discussion towards the end. We will just wait for, I think, 1 more minute for you to respond to this so that we can move on to the next one. Trishant, what do you think of the responses that we're getting so far?
I think some of them are interesting. Climate finance, definitely, it's very obvious.
Right.
The themes are getting smaller. I'm having trouble reading them. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, energy efficiency.
Energy efficiency, right? That's important.
Okay.
Do you think carbon capture technology fits into the theme?
I think it fits into the theme. Open to discussion,
Right.
but interesting.
Yeah. Interesting responses nonetheless. A bit too small for you, I'm sure.
Internet.
You can see the responses on your screen as well. All right. I think we can move on to the next one now. Yeah. Moving on to the next theme for the day, climate policy and politics. Again, the same rules, 25 characters for one response and 2 responses in total. And it would be great if you can think of some specific topics instead of general ones like climate politics or climate justice, which is the whole theme actually in itself. Right. SDG 13 and NDCs. Okay. All right. 4 people have responded. Can everybody else put in their responses, please? SDG 7. Okay. Eco-politics. Green equity. Interesting. So maybe towards once we are done with this, maybe a couple of you can unmute yourselves and talk a little bit about what were you thinking when you chose these 2 as your as subtopics for a particular theme. That would give us more insights. Right. I think we can move forward now. If anybody wants to put in their responses, please do so now. We'll move on in a couple of seconds. Okay, so now for this particular response, I would request you to put your name below the response so that we can talk to you if we feel that the activity is very innovative, very interesting. Any activity that you have been doing so far, so something that has been successful, something that has not worked probably, then you can share why it did not work. Any activity that you've been using to teach your students about any topic related to climate change. Can you please also enter your name while entering your response so that we can talk to you later on? Once a considerable number of people have put in their responses, we will also give you a chance to vote for what you think are the best activities. These also can be teaching methods that you've been using. These can be something as simple as a group discussion done in an innovative way, or any other particular format that you've been following? Any project that you have undertaken with your students or that you have read about? Tashan, do you think do you have any inputs on what could be a good activity, maybe?
Yes. So one activity idea could be to do a case study
Right.
debate in classroom about um, any sort of project or any policy that the government has come up with, and what are the advantages, the disadvantage of such a policy. For climate justice, one of the activity ideas that I learned was organizing a model climate summit
Right.
for students,
Right.
making them various actors, farmers, politicians, and putting their points across and discussing and debating. So these kinds of active learning process can be used.
Yeah, something like an MUN.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, we have got some interesting responses. Packaging, design and material innovation projects from Chitra ma'am, ideas hackathon. Interesting.
I would like to know the tailor-made idea
Yeah.
about Nilgiris. What did you exactly do there?
Yeah.
It's an interesting point.
Hi, can I respond?
Yes,
Or
please.
okay. So, I have actually a question. I'm teaching climate change for last 5 years. 5 years. Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, you are, sir. Please go on.
Yeah. Okay. So before that, I was teaching, a business school in Hyderabad. So wherein, we prepare the kids in a very different way. Aspirations. Or at the end of the year, they have to buy a Lamborghini car or fly in an aeroplane or a pink house with a swimming pool and a great view. Okay, but the last 5 years, things have changed. Okay, so I really don't know. Like I'm stuck up. Of late, I'm really stuck up. Like what to teach. Whether they have to aspire their goals or stick to these things. So I'm actually stuck because people ask, students ask. I teach both. I'm an informal educator. I engage both college students as well as school students. So they have questions like, you come in a car, should we buy a car or a truck or what, or should we travel? Everybody has those, basic aspirations, traveling the entire world and building a big house, buying so much of stuff.
Uh,
Okay. So, how do we handle it? So what I've done for the last 2 years. I mean, I'm just asking my question, tailor made, because when we talk about climate change, most of our data are like India based or somewhere in the world. It's happening in the US. So the people, students, they really don't connect unless otherwise it's happening in their hometown, unless otherwise they have witnessed it. So, I've tried all those things which didn't actually work out. Any case studies, even next to, so I live in Nilgiris. My next district is
Sir, your
Coimbatore.
voice is breaking up a little
Uh,
bit. Would it be all right if we came back
so what happens
with this?
in Coimbatore, they doesn't even care. Okay, or what happens in Bombay, they don't even bother about, or in Delhi, or what happens in other country. Hello.
Sir, your voice is actually breaking up. Would it be all right if we
Yeah,
came
yeah,
back
sure,
to you
sure, sure.
once this response activity is done? So we've got 26 responses on activity ideas. Now
Okay.
you will see an option to vote for different
Yeah,
activities,
yeah, sure, sure, sure. Yeah.
right? Uh, yeah. So you can vote for whichever activity you feel needs to be discussed, or we need to know more about it. Okay, I think a lot of you have voted. let's look at the results. If all of you are done. Okay, I think should we do this again? There was some issue. No, no worries. Let's move on to the next one. Right. Now, let's move on to the resources that you find useful. So any particular website that you are using, any report that you are using, any book that you are using apart from the regular textbooks at the college level, I think there's no such thing as a dedicated textbook. So any particular resource that you feel is useful and helps students connect to the topic, please enter that here. Yeah, these can be generic resources as well. Like somebody has mentioned reports available on internet. We understand that you might not have the links or anything handy at this moment. Okay, somebody has shared a link also. Newspapers. If you were there in our session in the last month, August, how you can use newspapers as an effective tool to talk about SDGs and climate change. We discussed that using an activity. You can go to our YouTube channel or to our website and access the recording there. Down to earth, great to see down to earth here. CSE publications, okay. SOE, right. All the resources that Trishant has shared in his presentation, we will definitely share with you. Great to see down to earth here. CSE publications, okay. Real-time experience, okay. Let's hear more on this later. Okay, I think we've received about 19 responses. If anybody is typing a response, I'll just give you a couple of seconds to finish. And then we can come back together and discuss. Right, I think that's it. So what we have done using these responses is we have a collection of resources, we have a collection of activities now. Trishant will definitely be talking about the topics in more detail in a bit. And then we'll talk a little bit about the pedagogy, about the resources and everything. And we will put everything together in one document for you, and we'll share it with you after maybe in a couple of days. And you can use that as a hands-on guide to inform your classroom teaching, to prepare for your lessons, whichever way works for you. So, right. I can see a lot of responses in the chat box as well. We'll come to that also. So, Trishant, let's take up the first theme that we discussed today: climate mitigation and adaptation. What were the responses that you think could be discussed more, or what are the key topics that you think we can take up?
Can we go back to the...
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think we got a lot of responses.
Maybe we can ask somebody to share.
Yeah, we can. I think the theme of individual climate action lifestyle is something that has come up, and I did not touch upon it a lot in my slides. As individuals, what are we supposed to do? As I already said, that climate action is also to be situated in the specific condition of communities, individuals. What is their footprint? for the Western world, it is definitely a lot more. So they, in terms of individual action, they have a lot more to think about it vis-a-vis people in India. Not everyone, because there's a significant inequality in terms of consumption within India as well. It is important to teach lifestyle-based action, what can be done. The government has already come up with a program, the Life Initiative of Government of India. What is also important to keep in mind is that we cannot force certain kind of lifestyle instructions or choices on everyone. Everyone will have a different, every community will have a different kind of makeup. So you can teach lifestyle based, reducing consumption, reducing your lifestyle needs. That is definitely a good part of the whole climate action. I don't have any conflicts with that.
Right. And what you say is very neatly flows also into what we commonly call the indigenous adaptation strategies, the time-tested, sustainable practices that have been adopted by communities so far. And they might be different from what we are advocating at.
Yeah, at a more uniform level, at a national level or at international level, definitely.
All right. So if we could just compile everything and I
can see.
So if I will just share this with you. Right. So this is just a basic overview of what we discussed in climate mitigation and adaptation. Tushant, would you like to just give an overview?
To start with what I said, it's incredibly important to establish the science with students, because there should be no doubt that this is climate change. This is what is happening, and it has to be related with the everyday experience. Extreme weather events is something that we can all relate to in mega cities in India. Then the impacts of climate change, extreme weather events, again, mitigation and adaptation. So why is it important to discuss mitigation and adaptation? Again, when I say climate action, because we all know the problem. We've been discussing that with students, but something that comes up again and again is, what do we do about it? So the actual actions and how do we understand the importance or the priority of those actions will be discussed within mitigation adaptation. I think the focus should be on these parts equally as much as we are giving to discussing the impacts. And then, of course, the challenges associated with these kinds of action. So more or less, these are the topics that I discuss, or I don't have any problem with.
So if you are planning to introduce climate change into your curriculum, or if you're looking to, update it, add on to it. So what we're essentially saying is maybe you can begin with talking about the science of climate change, then a little bit about the extreme weather events, the impacts, and whatever has been discussed today about the climate action under which we talk about mitigation and adaptation both. So
I think I would like to take the question that Sir asked.
Janardhan Sir.
So there were two parts to the question, as I understand, sir. One was that you communicating the aspirations that students should have, and how that is in conflict with what we are discussing about reducing our consumption. So I think to answer that question, aspirations do not always have to be individualistic, but I guess it's a business school, so I understand that that has to be a part of your discussion. But I think, let's say, for example, when you talk about car, or showing them the aspiration of buying a car, it can also be tempered with realities, or it can also be tempered with what is coming ahead. So for instance, how can they aspire for EVs, or how can they aspire for something that is more congenial to the needs of tomorrow, how the government is coming up with regulations, how the fossil fuel is going to be more costlier tomorrow. So buying an EV would be helpful for them. So I think you will have to come up with ways to relate how their aspirations have to be tempered with these kinds of realities. But I think there is no problem in individualistic aspirations that people can have and should have. The second part of this was that your students are not relating to the problems that you are telling them about climate change. I think when we talk about climate change, the science of climate change is not the only thing that we are talking about. We are also talking about the policies, the geopolitics, the changing economics around climate change. So some of these issues will be in some ways related, can be related to what the students are studying. For instance, if you are teaching finance, how can climate finance be related to the subjects that you are teaching, and how that is more served as more of an interest for them rather than if they are not interested in climate science. So there can be ways, and I think even climate science, the impacts of climate change are very much present. So I don't see why students won't relate to flooding in Mumbai occurring at a time when it wasn't supposed to. So yeah, that is what I think.
Okay. Would anybody like to add on anything, ask anything before we move on to the next theme?
So my name is Chitra. I have a question regarding is it helpful if the educators first and foremost introduce these subtopics or sub-themes, which is largely creating an awareness that climate change is a significant reality and therefore climate action is necessary. But from that stage of awareness, is it necessary that the educators also don't drop it there, but take the discussion further so that it affects their everyday choices, whether it is the profession they choose or the type of lifestyle they choose to opt for, or their life goals also? Like, do you think it can have that kind of impact for an educator within the constraints we all work in, or is it something that is beyond the classroom?
I think it is not, but like every other subject, I think it is difficult to take the learnings back home and inculcate them in their own lives. It's a difficult thing. I guess that is what something that you would like to understand. For this subject as well, it's difficult, but I think it should be encouraged. Like whatever you are teaching in the classroom, definitely people should take that home. Students should take that home, apply it in their own lives. But I would also say that the awareness part is equally important, the awareness part of all of it, and not just the individualistic action that people take. So even though you can teach it, I wouldn't say it's a failure of the subject if the students are not actually using them in their own life. But importantly, knowing is, I think, a much bigger achievement at this point. I hope I was able to make some sense around it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just add on to what you were saying, Tushant. While you are absolutely right that awareness is an equally worthy goal when it comes to climate change, I think something also has to be said about the kind of activities that are being done and the kind of impact that they're creating for children. So, for example, they need to know hard data about their consumption levels, maybe, so something as a carbon footprint calculator, so they would know how their small actions are actually creating a larger impact in the long run. And when that happens, probably maybe 1 out of 100, 1 out of 1,000 would have that change that Chitra ma'am is talking about, and the others definitely would be aware, so in a better position than those who aren't.
I think
Right.
that is helpful to kind of combine awareness along with the realization of individual or a group's impact in the larger picture, right? Like that's what I take away from this. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Okay, let's move on to the next one, which is climate policy and politics. Prashant?
Yeah, so when I was discussing this part, I rushed through the section. I think the global agreements, again, the awareness of global agreements is important. What sort of agreements have been signed? The not only the climate change based agreement, but other agreements related to biodiversity or combating desertification. And I think that helps to situate what action different countries are taking and what actions our national government is taking, and how the process is moving, because often there is a complaint that a lot of people go to COP, people talk a lot but nothing moves. Actually, things move, but the noise around that is so much that it is difficult to take away the important things or important steps that have been taken. So keeping up with that uh, development is important, and that's why how global agreements work, how the UNFCCC is functioning is important to be taught. India's climate policy, what the government is doing, I don't have much to say why this has to be taught. Everyone should know what the government is doing. What the state governments are doing is also important. I think subnational goals are being formed by various governments. Uh, Subnational governments as well as the national government also have adaptation plans. So if that adaptation plan, for instance, if we are in Maharashtra and the government of Maharashtra has a SAP-CC, state uh, adapt, adaptation plan on climate change. So using that to see what the state government is doing is more relatable to people, what is happening in their more local environment. So using these local plans, using these local policy that the government has come up is also a healthy practice in educational settings. Then, of course, the politics of it, the developed versus developing countries, what are the issues in discussing equity? When we were talking about agriculture issue, I think Pratima ma'am mentioned about the agriculture consumption. So agriculture is a very politicized topic. The consumption of uh, 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 the agriculture consumption in terms of food in the West versus what is the condition in developing countries, and these kinds of politics is important to know before we jump on to debate about what sort of goals we should establish for ourselves, and what are the downsides of cutting down our own, let's say, agriculture emissions or target setting in agriculture. For instance, uh, in recent, a few months ago, there were huge protests in Europe related to farming practices and how the policies related to climate change were not being accepted by farmers in Europe. So there was a huge backlash, and there have been several such protests earlier in Europe as well. So that is also sort of a learning in policy formulation within our country as well. How do we navigate the question of methane emission from our land? And so the international context, the international politics also becomes important. And then climate equity and CBDR, the foundational principles of climate are important because, recently I was doing a paper on trade. There's a trade policy called as Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism that the European Union has come out. It would basically charge or tax products that enter the European Union based on the carbon emission of those products, the emission that has taken place in the production of those products. Now, this is a trade policy, and the trade policy is bringing in climate because of the consideration of carbon emissions. But the problem here is that in trade policy, there is no climate related principle like equity or CBDR set in stone. So there, this kind of consideration is not there. But in climate, it is. So when we talk about other fields of other disciplines like trade, we ought to know when we are dealing with such kind of policies, how do we take the issue of equity and CBDR into such policies when climate is being included. So I think these kinds of policies are important in that sense as well.
Right. Thank you, Trishant, for explaining it so comprehensively. So we hope that with this, with these two flowcharts, you got a basic overview, an idea of how you can, if you want to venture into the area of teaching climate change for the first time, how you can do that. Or if you're already doing that, what can you add on to it? How can you deepen the discourse that is taking place in your classrooms? And you can adapt it to whichever level, grade level that you are teaching, be it undergrad, postgrad, higher education, whichever students that you are dealing with. So that, I think, is it for this particular section. Let me just quickly talk a little bit about the responses that we've got for the resources and the activities. So when we are talking about any pedagogy for climate change, one of the key things that comes up is how it has to be interdisciplinary, how what Trishant also mentioned, it has to incorporate social justice, it has to incorporate data, it has to incorporate science based insights. So it has to be interdisciplinary in nature, and even more so, it has to move from a local level to a global level. So enabling students to relate to what is happening within their own communities at the local level, and then move on to the issues which are happening, say, at the national level or even at the global level. And then involving students into coming up with solutions, into coming up with simple ways through which they can get involved in action for these different issues, and how these local issues actually tie in within the larger discussions that we are having today, or that we have in COP or any other national or international forum. So with all this, I think a lot of the activity ideas that we got, for example, what Janardhan Sir mentioned about tailoring it to the Nilgiris, or visiting land use, visiting agricultural land, looking at the land use pattern, then all of those things which are actually involve going out into the local community, exploring what is happening, how have they been impacted, and how this builds up into a larger issue. So we got a lot of interesting activity ideas. Trishant also gave in a few. We will definitely be sharing all these activities with you. We'll add on a few more, and we hope that you're able to use these into your classrooms. Right, I think that's it. Would anybody like to share anything specific that you've been doing in the classroom? Maybe we can take one response. We're already short on time. Carbon footprint calculation, Babita ma'am has mentioned, which again is a very simple yet effective tool to talk about how our daily practices have been impacting the environment. Trishant mentioned case studies, so some people have also mentioned analysis of different case studies. Right. I think these are this is basically the sum total of all the activities and the resources that we have got. If you have anything to add on, if you have anything to ask, any comments, you're most welcome to do that. Otherwise, we'll just wrap up the session for the day.
I also wanted to add something that I learned a couple of months back, which was regarding carbon calculation. That there are some statistics that every state government electricity board publishes. I'm not sure if that is true for every state government regarding how much electricity comes from thermal or hydro or whatever. That is one thing. The other thing is about how carbon footprint calculation kind of misses even looking at digital technologies and the footprint, say, use of websites and internet has. So if we look at it in a more thorough way, then actually everything kind of gets like, so something like internet shopping is seen as, oh, we're reducing emissions, but somewhere the emissions are happening either when shipping happens or even through server systems and databases.
Right. Thank you, Chitra ma'am. You have been actively contributing throughout the session. Thank you. Tushant, any closing comments from your side?
Yeah, I think as ma'am mentioned, the electricity data, yes, you have national data that the government of India comes out with. You can check that on Niti Aayog's website. It has a infographic where in detail it explains what sort of electricity is coming from which source, and in the internet you can also find the emission factor for each source, so that you can also calculate the emissions when you are using a unit of electricity. I think there are a number of activity ideas that we have got in previous session as well, and that we also have come up with. I think Sakshi will share them with you. Yeah, I think.
All right. So thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much, Tushant. Now, many of you are joining us for the first time today. So let me quickly tell you a little bit about our GEN network that I think some of you have been wondering, what is this Green Educators Network? It is a community of college educators, and as a community, we are committed to sustainable development, equitable development, and to raising awareness about all the contemporary environmental issues in our students and in our teaching methodologies as well. So if you joined us for the first time, if you're a college educator, please do join the network. We have shared the link in the chat box. And we will be sharing the resources that we collate from this session in our monthly newsletter. We have also shared the link to subscribe for the newsletter in the chat box. Please do that if you haven't done so already. And I think that is it from our side for today. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you for all the valuable insights and the points that you've given. Everything that you have shared today has added on to the session in a very, very positive way. Thank you, Tushant, for handling the session, for coordinating everything so well, and for explaining everything so well, making it so easy. Right. Thank you so much. We will come back to you with the certificates soon, and we'll see you in the next session. Thank you.